What's up, everyone? Today I'm going to give you 49 examples of decandling young Japanese black pines. All right, well, 49 examples is probably more than we really need, but my secondary sort of motivation for doing this is to get this flat of 49 pine trees decandled. And the reason is that there's a lot of things to think about when you are working on making bonsai. I have a lot of black pines, and these are in their third growing season, and they're all in these 2-inch by 2-inch by 3-inch containers, and I have those nestled into an Anderson flat. So there's 7 by 7 or 49 of them in total in the flat. They're nestled in the Anderson flat to keep the bottoms from drying out too quickly at the growing grounds. And it just sort of creates more robust growth, just like I do with some trees in bonsai pots, to allow the roots to escape out the bottom into the flat. And I guess I should get started on the 49 of these while I'm talking, so let me just do that. If you don't understand what the purpose of decandling is, then that is going to be the first thing that you really need to understand from this video. And just like defoliation in deciduous trees, decandling Japanese black pines and some other pines, it's not a technique that you can apply specifically to every type of pine, but there are a number of pine species that it can be used on. So decandling is a heavy cutback method. It is a way to cause your tree to stop getting larger and start getting sort of smaller and finer. So the fact that these are all growing in 2-inch containers already has them headed in that direction, but I'm going to go further with them, and with all of these, cut them back so that they don't have the problems that fast-growing trees tend to have. So as I'm pulling these out, you can see that there's a few roots that I'm scissoring off the bottom. That's not going to make any real difference. They've been in these containers for better part of 2 years at this point. There's 2 different operations that I'm largely going through here in decandling, and the first one I'll demonstrate is to literally just cut off the extension, the main trunk extension. So this is going to be the next section of the trunk, and then these little buds that are on the sides here would be side branches, but I'm actually going to take all of these off. If I leave the little side branches, they'll get a lot stronger, but what I'm trying to do is induce the ring of dormant buds that's right here at the base of that candle that I just cut off to start growing. And at the same time, I'm looking at the side growth that's down below, if there's any, and making sure that it's relatively short and compact. In some cases, it's useful to decandle behind the node, and so I'm going to, instead of decandling just above where these needles are, so these needles were grown last year and this is this year's extensions, instead of decandling at the base like I did on the other one, which is what I'm doing right now, that would be decandling it and leaving those dormant nodes. If I instead cut below the node like that, then the tree is going to be forced to make buds from the pairs of needles. So in each one of these pairs of needles, there's a dormant bud. Those will stay dormant unless the tree has a reason for them to start growing, and I just gave it that reason. Now, if I was trying to make big trees, I would not be doing this. And let me just be clear, every single one of the 49 trees in this flat that I'm working on today are going to be small, shohin or mame size. If I was going for a larger trunk or a larger size tree, this extension that I'm cutting off right now is the main driver behind creating more wood in the trunk here. So by removing this, I am basically stopping the plant from making wood for the rest of this year. It's going to go into sort of a recovery mode and just start to send out finer growth that is great for small bonsai, but is not great if you want to have a trunk larger than this. So I have a lot of pines, like I said, and because I don't want them all to look exactly the same, I'm going to do different things to different ones. So with this particular flat, the majority of them I'm going to just cut below the node to force a lot of budding, and then I'm going to wire the trunks here in a minute. So let me go through and finish cutting all of them, and then we'll get to wiring. So with this one, it has this long branch here, and just opposite that branch is a short branch, and then you probably can't see very well, but there's also a couple of small nodes here. So I'm actually just going to take off that branch entirely, and I'm going to cut behind the node up here into those needles to force more budding that's compact. This is not a black pine. When I started the seeds for this batch, I also started a batch of Scots pines, and the seed for those Scots pines was from Northern Ireland, I think it was. And it's been interesting to watch those guys grow. Generally speaking, I don't think that you decandle Scots pines the way that you do Japanese black pine. I believe that it's more of a white pine technique where you're taking the new growth and and trimming off half of it. But in the case of these young plants, I'm going to treat any Scots pines that are in this flat, which there might be a couple more of them, just like I treat black pines, and see what happens. Now, in young trees in development like this, you can go for speed or you can go for character. It's kind of hard to get a lot of character when you're going for speed. And what I mean by that is that if I just let this grow, it's got a nice set of roots on it. You can see them extending out the bottom here, and it's got a nice trunk extension on it. And so this is, from this tree's perspective, a good growing year. And because it's nestled into a flat between a bunch of others, the side buds down here are relatively small or even non-existent. There's some teeny tiny ones here. I don't really see any at the 1 year node right here, even though there are some needles that might be hiding the buds. If I want this to get bigger, it's kind of behooves me to keep this going. But the problem is that this is not going to make any side branches between here and here if I don't force it to do that. And so that means that as a bonsai, I might have this giant gap between places where I have actual budding. And so in order to get it to bud, I would either need to remove this entirely, or I could bend this over and use one of these smaller side things as the trunk extension and then have this be a sacrifice branch. But allowing this to be part of the finished composition means that you're going to have a whole lot of space in your composition where there's not branching coming out. And it doesn't matter how old the tree gets, if that isn't addressed in some way, be it by cutback and forcing of buds closer together or by grafting later in the tree's life, you are not going to have branches anywhere except for a few widely spaced whorls. Now, if you're going to decandle at the node, you have to take off all of the candles that are coming out from the node, even if they're very, very small. So the 5 that I just cut here, the center one and 4 side branches, were all reasonably easy to see. If you leave one of those, it will inhibit the growth of the dormant buds that are at the node point here. But like I said earlier, with most of these, because those nodes are already kind of problematic, I'm actually cutting behind the node to force the tree to make more needle buds. Here's an example of one that has 3 much smaller buds there, and those would get a lot stronger if I cut this off. But I'm going to even go behind that and force it to start over from scratch. All right, that's 49. On some of these, I decandled above the node when they were slightly weaker than the ones, than other ones in the same flat. And when you decandle above the node and leave that ring of dormant buds, the response from the tree tends to be a little bit more quick and more reliable in terms of how many buds or how fast it's going to respond. When you force the tree to make needle buds, you are essentially making things more compact, but you are creating a situation that's a little bit less reliable. With seedlings like this, you're gonna get buds somewhere, but it might not be exactly where you want. With an older tree with a lot of branches, you might actually have the tree give up on a few of the branch tips that you cut back behind the node if it's not perfectly healthy before decandling. .3mm aluminum wire. I'm applying it, sticking the tail into the ground. These I thought had been wired previously, but they almost look like they haven't. What I'm doing, because I'm planning on making relatively small trees out of these, is giving them some pretty tight movement, either shohin or even sub-shohin size. So the response that I expect from this tree is basically that these small buds that were at the 1-year node are going to take off, and then it's going to bud up in here out of these needles as well. As you can see, they're relatively flexible, even though they're probably about a 1/4 inch diameter at this point. Ugh. All right, 49 trees done, and that was kind of fun. I don't know. Cutting them back and getting them into interesting shapes like this can be a really rewarding process. I will be growing these guys out for the rest of this season, and then for some, one of the things I haven't mentioned is that this cutback process might just be preliminary to growing them out to have bigger sized trunks. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is, after they've established some short budding in here, I'll take one of those buds and allow it to become a sacrifice branch and plant these into larger containers if that is going to be the case. Otherwise, I would pot them down into small bonsai containers to become mame or small shohin sized trees. If you want to pick up a couple of black pines, you can find them on our website, bonsaify.com. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will see you next time.